Are you my new mom? The first time I met Thomas, he was noticeably smaller and thinner than the average 3-year-old I'd seen during my child care training. His clothes were too small and dirty. He looked around restlessly, appearing scared and uneasy. It was clear that he wasn't being properly cared for. A poor kid starved for love. Yes, Thomas, nice to meet you. Wanting to put him at ease, I greeted him with the brightest smile I could muster. Drawn by enthusiasm, Thomas tightly gripped my hand. His little hand broke my heart. I'm Mary, 37 years old. I've always loved kids and dreamed of becoming a preschool teacher. I also wanted to have at least 3 kids of my own and build a happy family. But I ruined those dreams myself. I'd always had painful periods, but avoided going to the gynecologist out of embarrassment. After all, periods aren't an illness, right? But one day the pain became unbearable. When I finally got checked, I found out that I had a uterine disorder that required immediate surgery. I lost my uterus, and with it any chance of having children of my own. I gave up on becoming a preschool teacher, too. It would be too painful to continue working with other people's kids. Then James, who is 3 years older than me, changed everything. I'd taken a job at a regular company where I met him. He was assigned to train me, although he didn't seem too focused on his work. He took personal calls and texts and would chat whenever he could. I used to find him annoying, but during one of those casual chats, I learned that James had just separated from his wife. It seemed his wife left abruptly, abandoning their young son, Thomas. I couldn't believe anyone could abandon their child like that. That conversation, which I usually would have ignored, suddenly felt important. James noticed my serious listening and began talking more freely. In hindsight, I might have been a potential future wife in his eyes. Wow, so who takes care of Thomas during the day? Right now, my mom's helping out. Coming from her place to take care of my kid, James said. She keeps nagging me to find a wife, especially for my child's sake. From what I gathered, James's mom had made an urgent trip from Minneapolis to help out. James was the second son of a farming family in Minneapolis, and the farm had already been handed down to the first son. Originally, the plan was to have James's mom take little Thomas back to the farm. But the wife of the first son was vehemently opposed, saying, I've got my own kids to look after. I'm not taking care of the second son's child. So, with no other option, James's mom was taking care of Thomas in James's apartment. Even James's in-laws refused to take the child, and nobody would tell him where his wife was. I felt a strange jealousy towards James's wife, whom I had never met. She gave birth to a child I couldn't have and then just abandoned him. That was unforgivable. If she didn't want him, I would take care of him. How about I become your wife? I was actually going to college to become a child care worker, I suggested. Really? Are you sure? And so we got married, but it wasn't exactly because I was in love with James. However, the first time I met Thomas, he was undeniably adorable, but he also seemed anxious and nervous. I soon found out why. Patricia, James's mom, and now my mother-in-law, said to me upon first meeting, Well, Thomas has a lot of likes and dislikes, just like his birth mom. He's not cute at all and doesn't even resemble James. He might not even be his son. Patricia, Thomas can hear you. It's fine. He's young and won't remember. I'm going home now. See you all later. Patricia hastily left, but not before bad-mouthing Thomas's mom in front of the child. Thomas is 3 years old. He understands what adults say. "I don't like that, Grandma," Thomas whispered. "I'll protect you from now on. I'll protect this child, treating them as if they were my own," I vowed in my heart. After getting married, I started to understand why James's ex-wife left. Parental burnout wasn't the whole story. Patricia may be difficult, but the real problem is James's emotional abuse. That day happened to be particularly hectic. Even after dinner, laundry wasn't folded. I hadn't checked Thomas's school planner, and nothing was prepped for tomorrow. Irritated at James, who was lounging on the sofa watching TV, I said, "James, could you at least bring the dishes to the sink?" "Huh? Why?" James didn't even look away from the TV. "What do you mean, why? I could use a little help here." I stumbled over my words, not sure how to explain further. "Wait, doesn't that sound a bit off? Mary, you're asking me to help with the chores, right? If I help, you get a break because there's less work for you. But you can't help me with my job at the office, can you? That's unfair and doesn't make sense." As he confidently insisted he was right, I was stunned. While part of me thought there was some logic to his argument, I also felt that stating it so bluntly was wrong on a human level. Thomas, who had been playing with his toys, silently gathered the dishes for both of us and brought them over to me. "Mom, here you go." "Aw, thank you, Thomas." The dishes were a bit wobbly, but I was happy he wanted to help. But I also felt guilty for making such a small child feel this tension. James seemed indifferent to both my feelings and Thomas's efforts. "You handle stuff inside the house. I work outside. You're like a professional housekeeper, so do your job properly." That's all he had to say. James's ex probably couldn't stand his emotional abuse either. James really doesn't care for Thomas at all. Apparently, influenced by Patricia, James doesn't think Thomas is his child. Although Thomas resembles his mother overall, certain features are dead ringers for James. James is indifferent to Thomas, even suggesting, "Maybe I should just put him in a facility. I'd save on costs and be free." I responded, "At least until he graduates high school, we should take care of him. I'll contribute financially." "Fine, but if Thomas wasn't here, I wouldn't have even married. Make sure you handle the housework." James had always said he didn't want any more kids and had no interest in Thomas either. He treated me like excess baggage, only valuing me for housework and childcare. What a terrible man. I couldn't bear the thought of making Thomas any more miserable than he already was. Life is really unfair. I would never give up on my own child. James and I didn't marry for love, and he took advantage of this to cheat on me frequently. He was often out late, claiming it was for work. I had taken a temporary leave from my job to settle Thomas into our new life, but decided to go back. I had made up my mind to do whatever it took to protect poor Thomas. Thomas, who was starved for affection, really took to me and is incredibly adorable. James never attended any of Thomas's school events, not for kindergarten nor elementary school. Thomas had given up on his dad and acted as if he didn't exist. People often mistook us for a single mother and her son. Although James and I were just sharing a life, Thomas and I had become a real family. Fast forward 15 years. Thomas was a high school senior, accepted to his top choice college, and planning to live on his own come spring. On the day of his high school graduation, I couldn't stop tearing up seeing him in his school uniform for the last time. Sadly, parents couldn't attend the ceremony and had to watch online. It was a sign of the times, but it felt lonely. After sending Thomas off in the morning, I set up my laptop in the kitchen and got ready for the day. Until it's time to start work, I go through albums and Mother's Day gifts, reminiscing about the happy memories that feel both long ago and all too recent. Seeing this, James smirked and said, "Thanks for playing housemaid all these years. You're of no use now. Let's divorce." "You're really a fool, you know that? Going all out for someone else's kid? Well, it made my life easier," he added, scoffing at me. I held back my tears. What a foolish man! I had been waiting for this day for a long time. Let's settle this before the graduation ceremony starts. Smiling, I responded, "Sure, let's divorce. Let me enlighten you on why I've put up with you for 15 years. "Huh?" In response to me, James looks utterly stunned. The reason I put up with being just a housemaid? Simple. I decided to protect Thomas. To shower love on a child yearning for affection is just human decency. I can't fathom how you could be so cold to your own child. Can't you show some love? And let's not forget, Thomas isn't a stranger. James seems to forget that Thomas was already legally adopted by me when we got married. Our relationship remains intact after divorce unless that adoption is nullified. Also, make sure to handle the division of assets properly. I've been contributing to living expenses and paying most of Thomas's tuition from my own earnings. I've kept meticulous financial records, so I'd like you to consider that. I hardly have any savings. It will essentially be splitting your money. In truth, I've been using any leftover living expenses James gave me to save for Thomas. I've been giving Thomas little amounts of money here and there. You earned this by helping with the dishes, or this is your allowance for the month, I'd say. I meticulously jot these down in a household ledger. The savings in Thomas's name are considered his separate property, so they're off the table in a division of assets. That's how I've been securing Thomas's financial future. His educational insurance is also reaching maturity soon. The insurance premiums are in both of our names, so it's part of the property to be divided. However, I've been shouldering all the complicated procedures, so I set the amount pretty high. Bit by bit, I've been increasing the money that James can't easily access. Furthermore, Thomas is 18 and legally an adult now. Being an adult means he can enter into contracts on his own and doesn't have to obey parental authority. So Thomas can become legally independent from James. Even though I've adopted Thomas, if I get divorced, I won't be able to protect him like I used to. That's why I've been wanting to avoid divorce, at least until Thomas graduates from high school and leaves home. Truth be told, James has been suggesting divorce for several years now. Apparently, I have outlived my usefulness now that Thomas is older and needs less attention. Especially with his new affair with a woman in her early 20s from a club. He's been shamelessly pressing for divorce. "She wants to marry me," he says. I had been pleading, "Please, just wait until Thomas graduates." So it was no surprise when James hinted at divorce on graduation day. "Your fling from the club, Nancy, is it? I wonder if she's received the court's special delivery by now." The special delivery is a legal document from the court containing my claim for compensation in the divorce lawsuit against his mistress. "How do you know her name?" "I know about almost all of your affairs, James. You weren't exactly discreet." Cracking the code on his mobile phone was easy since it was his birthday, and I even hired a detective, so gathering evidence was a breeze. "So you're telling me you're filing for compensation in the divorce, even though you don't love me?" This was supposed to be a mutual divorce. It's you who wants to marry your mistress. I'd say it's a unilateral decision on your part. I'll file for compensation in the divorce case. Objectively speaking, it's clear who's in the wrong, isn't it? Even though James treats me like a housemaid and claims there's no love, we're still legally a couple. I could easily sue his mistress for damages in the divorce case, and James is actually about to be served papers himself. When you're dealing with a man who morally harasses you, you never know what self-serving things he might say if you don't involve a neutral third party, like a court or a lawyer. You might have expected me to bring up divorce, but I've also been preparing, I say. I'm moving to a new apartment tomorrow. From now on, let's communicate through our lawyers. Oh, and don't forget, the most important thing is that I'm off to see a graduation ceremony, so don't you dare disturb me. James slumps to his knees when I emphasize my point. Did he really think I would leave him without getting anything in return? Just doing as he says? What a fool. He'll regret underestimating me. Later, after the graduation ceremony, Thomas hands me a bouquet of flowers. He had stopped by a florist on the way home. Thanks for everything so far, Mom. I'm looking forward to more good times, Thomas says, offering me his hand with a shy smile. I grasp Thomas's hand, which I hadn't held in a long time. His hand, once so small, was now larger than mine.